Hey, how's it going, everybody? Happy holidays. He is Arun, the Indian Cowboy. As you can see on your screen, I'm Scott Spreitzer. We are DocSports.com, talking a little bit of football, still in search of a title for the show. We got some good ones. We're kind of mulling it over, seeing what we're going to go with here. We've heard anything from white chocolate to Miami Vice
Scott and Arun, or
Scott and Arun, I think fits quite well, actually.
The other one is I.C. Scott.
I love that. I see Scott. That's good stuff. So we'll come up with one of these days. But, until then, we'll just keep talking back and forth a little bit about some football games. And, I'm going to talk about the college football playoffs on this show. And also, of course, the upcoming weekend and week 17 of the NFL as we close in on the playoffs in pro football. Real quick note, the $60 free account. If you're not yet a member over at DocSports.com, you click on the link below the video. Get yourself set up for the free $60 account. You can use those free $60 on any of our daily packages over at DocSports.com. We do have some playoff games this weekend. Of course, it kicks off on the 31st. Penn State laying a few points here. They're going to take on their opponent in this particular game. And I'm looking at Boise State in this game, and believe it or not, I don't know. I probably shouldn't say believe it or not, because I know a lot of people who do believe it. Boise State's getting about 60% of the tickets in this game, plus the points, but nearly 60% of the money as we talk on Thursday afternoon is siding with the Penn State Nittany Lions. The game, of course, being played in Phoenix on New Year's Eve. The other three playoff games are all going to go on on Wednesday the 1st. Texas laying 13.5 to Arizona State in Atlanta. The Longhorns have been a bit one-sided in betting circles. I'm kind of looking at my screen right now to see where it's at as we speak. And again, it's been kind of one-sided on Texas. Majority of the tickets, majority on the money on Texas. Out in Pasadena, you got Ohio State laying 2.5, total 55 against Oregon. 50-50 as far as tickets written, but Ohio State getting about 55% of the money as we speak. And then, of course, Georgia taking on Notre Dame in New Orleans. Georgia laying 1.5. In this particular game, like Texas, Georgia is getting some one-sided action from the public. Sharp money at this point has been coming in on the Irish. The early action from the Sharps came in on Notre Dame. They're going to go without their starting quarterback, Carson, back in this contest, Georgia. Last week, we saw one game that was a Joes versus Pros, IC, and Clemson was the public play, and Texas was the sharp play. And fortunately for me, I don't know if you had them or not, Texas was able to hold on and avoid blowing the cover. They almost did late, but we got the win anyway. Your thoughts on this upcoming weekend of playoff action, actually next Tuesday and Wednesday? These four games, man, I'm looking at them. I'm glad they're not on home fields, man, because we saw how much the home field advantage meant last week.
Yeah, I mean, I have 5 selections this week. I have won 4 straight weeks in football, so hopefully it'll be 5 in a row this week. And so my premiums are Texas Tech, Arkansas, Miami of Ohio, Colorado State, Panthers, Bucks, Michigan, Alabama, and Notre Dame, Georgia. So having said that, I can talk about all of these games. I will tell you that the Penn State, Boise State, I almost had it on my card. I almost went with Penn State because I thought, wouldn't it be fascinating for Penn State to send a message to Oregon and say, look, let me beat the snot out of a team that you barely beat. Kind of sending a warning shot to the bow to Oregon, saying, look at what we can do to a team. The same thing with Ohio State, sending a message. If Penn State can beat the snot out of Boise State. But I think Boise State also has heard a lot of Kirk Herbstreit, a lot of what has been said about how they don't belong. And maybe Boise State will say, we're not Indiana. Yeah. We're better. But then again, there's a lot of SEC teams, and me being, from Alabama, we're rooting for Penn State to demolish this team so that they say, like, look, you got to look at strength of schedule and all of that stuff too. So I've kind of gone back and forth on this game. I can see either way how you want to. I mean, if you're an odds maker, what else would you make this line? You can't make it at 7.5. You probably have to make it at 10.5, especially after. It's funny. I mean, the team that's favored by 10.5 is obviously the lower ranked team. Yeah. So I'm just kind of staying away from that game. If I had to pick a side, it would probably be Penn State. As far as your what was the other game? The Georgia game. Yeah. The Georgia game I have a pretty good selection on. I will tell you this, that this is a fascinating game because Notre Dame no longer is playing Texas A&M. If they struggled against Texas A&M, this Georgia D-line is going to be issues, And let me tell you something. Georgia, their backup quarterback, being around a lot of Georgia fans, they believe that he's much better than Carson Beck.
Well, he can move for one thing, with his feet. So
Yeah, and there are a lot of people in the Southeast who are kind of happy that Beck got hurt a little bit because they want to see Gunner play. And so they're looking forward to that too. So that's going to be a fascinating game. And I think Notre Dame, they're going to play big boy football now, right?
Sure.
They're about to play a very, very good team. So we'll see how that shakes out. And what was the other one you wanted to talk about?
Was it the Ohio State game?
Yeah, dude. Okay, so my theory on this game is that it's interesting. Ohio State comes in as a 2.5-point favorite. It could work two ways. It could work as Oregon just completely feels disrespected. Like, this is ridiculous. What else more do you want us to do? We're 13-0. We're undefeated. And I really don't. I went with my top play with Ohio State last week, but do I really trust Coach Day? I mean, do I really trust him? Do I really trust Chip Kelly not to be an idiot? And so you start thinking about that, and you start thinking about Oregon, Dan Lanning's team. I mean, he will continue to tell them and say, no one respects you. No one respects you. And Oregon did beat Penn State. I mean, they have a great resume. I mean, they beat Penn State. They throttled Michigan at Michigan, which Ohio State couldn't beat them at home. So for that reason, I don't think this game is going to be 32-31 like last time. I do like the under in this game a decent amount. And that might be my free play on that day when the day is played.
Well, I know one thing that will not happen in this game, guaranteed 100%, that happened in that first meeting, and that's the Lanning move with the on purpose 12 men on the field to move that clock along. And of course, college football changed the rules there, so that ain't going to happen again. But yeah, people got to make the choice on that game because Ohio State was 3.5 in Eugene. They're 2.5 in the neutral site in Pasadena. And folks have to make that decision. Are you getting value on the Buckeyes, or is Oregon that much better over the course of the season than they were the first time these two teams met? So it's kind of a decision for people to make. That game the night before on New Year's Eve, Penn State and Boise State, I stayed away from it as far as the side is concerned. I do like the total here. I think there's going to be some points scored in that game. But I do have one premium play. I see it's an 8-star play in the New Year's Day playoff game. So there is one that I like quite a bit. So what do you say we move to Sunday's NFL, or Saturday's NFL, I should say? Chargers laying 4.5 at New England. That game is at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And most of the books right now have the Chargers laying 4.5 in this contest. Drake May's played better than I thought he was going to at this point of his young career. And while they're 2-6 in the last 8, talking about the Pats, they're a grand total of 13 points from 6-2, I see. There's been 61 and 57 points scored in the last 2 Charger games, with that defense being a little bit shaky of late. I don't think that's going to happen here. I actually like the under in this game, under 42.5. I think there's going to be a bit of an overreaction from the public betting the over based on what the Chargers defense allowed in the last 2 games. But I think it comes back in this particular game. We see a lower scoring contest.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I feel like every time a team is -4 or something, like remember the Lions recently against the Bears, like 6.5, they covered easily. These other dogs just aren't catching. You know what I mean? They're expecting them to hang tough, and they're just not catching. And the books are taking it on specific games, it seems. But when it comes to this game, yeah, I mean, the total sitting at 42 is a pretty low total as well. I'm staying away from this, man, and I love giving leads on every single game. I will tell you this: you have a Chargers team that is 9-6. A part of me almost wants to take the Patriots too, because I do feel like you have a coaching staff that's kind of coaching for its job. You know what I mean? There's a lot of rumor mill that this is not the coach. Mayo is not the guy, right? So it's very clear that he's not the guy. And with Carroll probably coming back to maybe coach the Bears and other things, I mean the Chargers can lay eggs, right? I mean the Chargers. They've shown that they can lay an egg. They beat my Falcons 17-13, but that was with Kirk.
Right.
Obviously, Kirk's not good. And they laid a huge egg against Tampa Bay. They did beat Denver, which was a monumental win. But I can see them having a letdown here and going into New England. New England played really well against Buffalo, losing by just 3 points. They can be sketchy, but they also lost by 1 point to the Colts. They also lost by 6 to the Rams, which that loss looks pretty good now. So I actually have a small lead on the Patriots, but I'm not jumping in one way or the other. I think there's better games on the board.
I didn't mean to hurry you along there. I just accidentally clicked on the next game, but
no,
it wasn't like, hurry up, I see. Get to
no, I didn't like this game anyway, so I'm glad you.
I just happened to click on it by accident. It is the next game of the schedule. The Broncos at Cincy with the Bengals laying 3. The total sitting at 49.5. If the postseason started today, I see, Denver's in. The Bengals need to win out. They need to get some help to get to the postseason. Your take on this battle between the Bengals and the Broncos, then I'll give you a couple of thoughts.
Dude, taking Sean Payton off of a loss is always a good idea, and even when they lost to the Chargers last 16-23, they came back to throttle the Saints and is welcoming back to New Orleans 33-10, or when they lost to Baltimore 10-41, they really should have beaten the Chiefs.
Yeah.
That's a game that, to me, that's a win for them. They should have beaten the Chiefs. And that game, I think, really shows a lot about Sean Payton. To be honest with you, it's not two teams facing each other, and I'm starting to realize this as I move along, and I'm sure you already know this. It's really two coaches facing each other.
Mm.
I mean, they really shouldn't call it like the Broncos versus the Bengals, or the Broncos versus the Chiefs. They should call it like, Peyton versus Reed.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even think it's the players that make the difference. It's the coach. And maybe I'm just being too nerdy about it, but I don't think the players are important. Mahomes is unbelievable, right? But I think it's the coaches that kind of put him in this situation. One of the rare exceptions are obviously Tom Brady and Mahomes. The coach didn't make the difference. I think Mahomes would have been successful anywhere.
Sure.
But having said this, I mean, I understand why the Bengals are favored. I get it. They won 3 in a row. They beat Dallas. They beat Tennessee. They held Cleveland to 6 points. But I don't trust this defense at all. And then you have Denver coming off of a loss, who's 9-6, who needs this game very much. It's a game against the Chargers that they honestly shouldn't have lost. The Bengals beat my Falcons 38-6. And the Chargers scored 15 points in the fourth quarter to win that game. That's going to tick off Peyton to no win. So I think the people are wrong. I think the Broncos are the right way to go.
This Bengals team drives me nuts because this is a team, you've got such great talent on the offensive side of the football. They should have never let Mixon get away. There's no doubt about that. You got to sign the guy. But you got Burrow, you got Chase. But then you flip over to the defense, and the organization won't – I think I've said this before when we've talked about this team. They won't spend money on the defensive side of the football. That's why they are in the position they are in, and they may miss the playoffs because of that. And so I think they've got to spend some money on the defensive side of the line of scrimmage. Having said that, they did pick off young quarterback DTR twice last week. They picked off Levis and Rudolph a combined 4 times the week before. And in fact, they've had at least 1 pick in each of the last 4 games. So you know what I'm looking at here? I'm going to be digging into some Bo Nix interception props. And the reason I will is because he's got the full support of Sean Payton. Nix goes out there. He looks great one series, and then have the next series. And I'm blaming this on just the fact that he's young, inexperienced. He'll come out the next series and he'll make, a boneheaded throw or 2 and sometimes get picked off. And I'm not trying to insult this guy when I say boneheaded. I think he's got a great career, but right now he's allowed to go out and do whatever he wants almost offensively. Peyton's come out and said it. He goes, I want this guy to have confidence, not look over his shoulder, do what he thinks is right. So with the way Cincy is actually picking off passes over the last few games, with Bo Nix potentially getting a little careless at times, I'm going to look at some of those interception props on Bo Nix this week, and I'm sure I'll find at least one. I mean, over 0.5, which means obviously 1 or more picks in this game, is probably going to be pricey by the time things roll around, but you might be able to find one like a 1.5 even that you might want to jump in on and get a nice price on that. So that's kind of my lead play on this game as we talk about the Broncos and the Bengals. Next up, the Cardinals at the Rams. Rams laying 6.5. The total sitting at 48, and I see the Rams laying 7 in this late game on Saturday night. The original opener was, believe it or not, around 3.5, folks. James Conner questionable as of Thursday afternoon for the Cardinals. Obviously, that's a big hit on the offense if he can't play. But I see it's so tough to go against McVay in the month of December. 15-2 against the spread in December games as teams really come on at the end of the year. And they've covered 10 of the last 13 against the Cardinals with 1 push in the mix. They've also got a little bit of, not a little bit, but big revenge on their minds because they got blasted by Arizona back when the Rams had a ton of injuries and were struggling. They lost 41-10. Eileen Rams here, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I like Rams too. I mean, obviously they had that 41-10 loss. And, Arizona coming off that bad loss to the Panthers, but they weren't even that impressive against the Patriots. I mean, I know they won 30-17. But that was a pretty sign of disrespect, the fact that they were only favored by 6 against the Patriots at home, I felt like. I would have thought they would have at least been 7.5. And, you have a Arizona team that also lost to Seattle by 12. They lost to Seattle twice, which wasn't a good look. And the Rams, at the end of the day, they're one of the few teams that beat the Bills. And they didn't just beat the Bills. They were up big on the Bills going into that fourth.
Mhm.
So they beat them pretty hot, solid, and they didn't have a letdown in the next week against the Niners or the Jets. But I feel like they've covered back-to-back games, but they haven't like played to their potential, right? Against
Mhm.
the Niners nor the Jets. I feel like the last good game they played was against the Bills. So I think that there's a lot to be desired what they have left in the tank here. And at the end of the day, this team still beat Minnesota too, and they beat Seattle on the road. The Rams have some big wins. They
Mhm.
have some big wins here, and I think that with the revenge on their mind, I mean, if you're an odds maker, what else are you going to set this line? -7
Right.
for a divisional game. I mean, so you're not trying to set a trap here or anything like that. So yeah, I like the Rams.
On to the Colts and the Giants. This game at New York or in Jersey, and the Colts laying 7.5, total 40.5. Listen, I thought Indianapolis had a fantastic game plan last week. I see they put 38 on the board and the 8-point win over the Titans. And I thought it was a great recipe. They threw the ball a grand total of 11 times. That was it. They ran the ball for 335 yards on 50 carries. Jonathan Taylor goes nuts. He rushed for 218 in that game. And I'm looking at handicapping this game last Sunday night. I'm like, uh-oh, New York. The Giants are 31st against the run. And their offense obviously is an absolute mess. The defense or the offense is averaging under 14 points per game in the last 10. And my original thought was I'm looking to play the Giants here. I had to pass because that run defense has been so bad. And Indy got it together. They said, that's what we're going to do. Jonathan Taylor, here's the football. Don't drop it at the goal line before you cross the goal line this week. And he tore him up. So it ended up going from a possible play on the New York Giants to staying away from the game.
Yeah, I mean, congratulations to the Colts, right? Putting up 38 points in their last game, and they were able to finally sort of bust out. And the Giants are 1-9 ATS their last 10, right? They just cannot cover whatsoever. And I like the fact that the Giants have given up 69 points in their last 2 games. I think the Giants honestly are just looking not to get embarrassed at home, to be honest with you. This game kind of reminds me of the Saints game, which was 11-14, but it won't be that bad. I feel like this has the tendency to maybe be like a 23-10 type of game. And the Giants have no offense. The Colts are going to have a massive letdown this week. After a successful, effort last week. And I like the under here. I think you have to set the line at 40.5. And I think this game's something like 23-13, 23-10. So I like the under.
Like your play there. I like the reasoning for that play. This game has been flexed to Sunday night. The Falcons at Washington. The Commanders laying 4, total 47.5. Division title still a possibility for the Falcons. I see, man. Michael Penix looked fantastic last week. The Giants pressured him over a dozen times. Couldn't sack him even once. He looked so calm the entire game. And I only saw a couple of times where you would recognize the guy's a rookie. So you had all these people saying, why did he start earlier this season? Well, maybe he wouldn't have been this good if he didn't have time to sit and learn. I think the Falcons got themselves a hell of a quarterback for the present and especially the future. It's tough to back a rookie quarterback in that first road game. And Washington's been pretty good, obviously. Your thoughts?
I'm going to tell you something nuts. I think Penix is better than Jaden Daniels. And I think that if you give him some time, and I think he's coming to the right spot. I know the Falcons spent a lot of money on Kirk, and $100 million is nuts, and they're going to save $10 million or whatever. But I think the ability to have him mature during that time, and $100 million is a lot of money. I get it, but having him mature for that, it could be priceless for them. So now, and now the fact they're letting him go kind of tells him that you're our guy. You're our guy, and he's 24 years old, so he's still got a good 8 years or so.
Yeah.
He's totally that calm vibe. He's easily the most pro-ready quarterback that came out. Yeah. He was 24 years old. He played for DeBoer. He's been to a couple different schools. He's had a lot of experience underneath him, and I like the fact. I mean, I like the fact that they set Atlanta as a 4-point dog and not like a 6.5-point dog. Atlanta's won back-to-back games. Atlanta should have beaten Minnesota if they had Penix. They should have beaten the Chargers if they had Penix. They wouldn't have beat the Broncos. They were outcoached there. But they would have beaten the Saints at New Orleans if they had Penix. Atlanta could easily, in my opinion, be an 11-4 team, which is better than Washington at 10-5. I know Washington beat Philadelphia. I think they're going to have a huge letdown here. This is the same team that almost lost to the Saints by 1 point. They beat them by 1 point. Washington lost to Dallas. And they had a revenge game against Philadelphia, and they did well. But I think Atlanta shocks people here. I like Atlanta +4.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that win over Philly is going to be draining. I really do. Big divisional win for Washington. So I was kind of sitting there thinking, boy, if I can get – I figured we'd get at least 3.5. And I thought if I can get 3.5 or more with the Falcons this week, then I would definitely be on that side. So we're in agreement there. Okay, I'm going to assign you to this game. You got to fly into the Big Easy, and you got to talk about the Raiders New Orleans game. So Boy, this is one of those games where I'm like, free tickets. I don't care. I'm not going. I kind of do that with the Raiders when they play in Las Vegas. Raiders laying 1.5 as we speak, the total 37.5 on the road. And listen, I get it when it comes to those on Las Vegas. At least they looked like they were still trying to win a football game last week, while the Saints, they looked like they wanted to be anywhere but Lambeau in the 34-0 loss to Green Bay last week. But this Raiders offense stinks. I mean, they were not good in last week's win over Jacksonville, but they didn't make mistakes. They had no turnovers. Basically was the difference of the game. And I was kind of looking at New Orleans a little bit deeper again, 3-4 the last 7 games, but 3 of the losses came by 1 point to Washington, 7 points to the surging Rams, 1 point to Carolina. Okay, Carolina's bad, but still, that's 9 points from 6-1 instead of 3-4. They're going to face a Raiders team with no Max Crosby. So if you said, I got to play this game, I'm going to back the home team here in New Orleans. I don't like this Raiders team, the coaching staff, anything about it.
Yeah, this is I wanted to make this my top play this week, but I laid off just because you don't want to put good money on bad teams and then feel like an idiot. But I love the fact the Saints come off a 0-34 loss to the Packers. This team, again, lost to Washington by 1, and they beat the Giants, and they lost to the Rams by 7, which looks amazing now. They beat Cleveland at home 35-14. They beat Jameis, and they beat the Falcons by 3 at home. And they lost to Carolina by 1 on the road, which doesn't seem that bad now either. I think Vegas coming off a win is 19 points is the most amount of points they've put up in 6 or 7 times, right? They haven't broken 20 points in the last 7 games. And I think the Saints look good this week. It's
funny because, when you're in an NFL town, you get that NFL team no matter what. And last week, if you didn't have the NFL package, and I have to get it every year for what we do, but, I'm sitting there going, man, I feel sorry for the folks in Vegas who have to watch the Raiders game against the Jaguars, who's our next team we're going to talk about. This was the first time all year when there were just a bunch of empty seats at Allegiant Stadium, because the Raiders, they're not selling out because Las Vegas. They're selling out because people are coming to town, touring and having a great time in Las Vegas, and their team is playing that weekend. So the Jaguars have no following. There's not a bunch of people in Vegas moved out here from Jacksonville like they did from Philly and New York and Boston and places like that. So, there were a ton of empty seats. It was sad to see. But here's Jacksonville back at home. They're laying a point in this one to the Titans, the total sitting at 40. And I see Tennessee's defense. They've given up 27 or more, 5 in the last 7 games. And as I mentioned earlier, they were shredded for 335 yards on the ground, almost 7 yards per carry by Indy last week. The Jags, as bad as they can be, they did lead the Raiders through 3 quarters, but couldn't hang on. Your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I like Tennessee. I think which team is more likely to tank, you know what I mean? And I think the clock is ticking on what Jacksonville can expect with Trevor Lawrence. I think clearly he's not the answer, you know, and they've realized that, which is funny. Michael Penix might be the answer for a team, but not Trevor Lawrence, Sure. So you have to draft correctly. And this goes back to show that you have to play against really good competition. Right. And then you can't just play a competition for a bowl game and expect it to be considered that you're good. And I think that's why Mahomes was so good, because he played that Big 12. He played really good competition, and he had really shitty teammates, and they were competitive. So when you're like that and then you're given help, you just crush it because you're so hungry for success. So I think, Jacksonville actually beat this team 3 weeks ago, 10-6. And then now Tennessee rolls into this. Tennessee put up 30 on Indianapolis. They put up 27 on the Bengals after that loss to the Jaguars. They beat Houston, right? Could you ever imagine Jacksonville doing any of these things that Tennessee has done recently? They lost to the Vikings by 10 or the Chargers by 10. They beat the Patriots. So I think they'll be fine here today. And I thought their quarterback played pretty well last week. And their coaches, obviously, I thought Rudolph was, even though he threw for 3 interceptions, he also threw for 250 yards, which is good. And Jacksonville coming off a loss. And I if you ask me if Rudolph or if Mac Jones, I'll go with Rudolph all day. Sure. And a little bit of revenge too. And I think the vibe is just better with Tennessee right now.
Number 1 run defense, Tennessee. So it's going to be all about, can Jacksonville air it out? And I don't trust the quarterback in this game, or in any game for that matter. Jets at Buffalo, the Bills 9, the total sitting at 46.5. And Buffalo cannot catch Kansas City now. As everybody knows, the Chiefs wrapped up home field advantage throughout the playoffs with the win on Christmas Day. The Bills would like to stay ahead of Baltimore just in case they would meet. The Ravens beat Buffalo earlier this season. So it's a case of the Ravens have that tiebreaker. I expect to see a strong effort here because they were so sluggish at the start of that game against New England last week. And then the Jets are so banged up. Offensive line, secondary. Aaron Rodgers, I see, is going to play with the knee injury. He's going to play through it. And I was checking Thursday afternoon. We're talking about these games on Thursday evening. I was checking Thursday afternoon, and Devontae Adams missed his midweek practice on a Wednesday. So I think they're just in a world of hurt this game. And I'm not a guy who runs out and throws money on big favorites in divisional games. But that's the side I think that wins here, the Buffalo Bills over the New York Jets.
Yeah, I think the Bills played like dog poop last week against the Patriots. I think they were kind of embarrassed as they were down, if you remember, Scott, 7-14 at the half, and I think that's going to irritate the heck out of them here. And they didn't play well, and you had Allen only throwing for 154 yards and one touchdown and one interception. And I don't blame him for doing that because he had just beaten the Lions, and that's much bigger fish to get excited about. He threw for 362 there, and he just had a huge letdown, but they still managed to win. The Jets are a funny team, right? They can be competitive against anybody. The last team they got blown out against was really against Arizona. And then Pittsburgh. Outside of that, the last 8 of 10, they've been competitive. They just haven't won. But I think the Bills know that they get to face the Jets here. Obviously, divisional opponent. They only beat them by 3 points last time. They're not going to take them lightly. They didn't play well last week either. I'm going to go with the Bills.
Yep, I'm with you. We're in agreement on that one. Panthers at Tampa Bay. Buccaneers laying 8, total 49 in this one. And boy, I'm going to side with the Bucs here. I see they really blew a winnable opportunity last week in Dallas. Still tied atop the division with Atlanta. Excuse me. Tampa dominated Dallas on the ground. They finished with a 25-15 first down advantage in that game against the Cowboys, but they had a -2 turnover margin, and it hurt. And then they watched Dallas place kicker Brandon Aubrey nail 4 field goals, all by more than 48 yards. There were 49 yards all the way up to 58. 2 of the field goals made were both 58-yarders. I mean, crazy stuff. Otherwise, they outplayed Dallas for the most part of that game. Carolina has they just don't have a passing game. The Panther defense is also terrible against the run. I think what happens here, Baker Mayfield gets a ground game to kind of make the Panthers play honest on defense. And then, Baker is, if he has something working for him on the ground, he's going to take his chances and he's going to nail and win those chances more often than not in this kind of scenario. So again, it's a lot of points, but I like Tampa Bay in this one.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually my 6-unit selection in the NFL this week. And, last week I had the Falcons as my 6-unit against the Giants. And so what I would tell you about this one is the last time, I can't tell you much about the side here because that's my 6-unit, but I will say that I think I wouldn't be surprised at all if this game goes under because Carolina ain't going to score 36 points again like they did against Arizona. And I can tell you that the Bucs, you're right, they're pissed off that they gave up 26 points to Dallas. That's the most amount of points that they've given up in their last 6 games. So I do like if I had to pick something on the total, I like the under in this game.
I used to do a show a couple years ago after Baker had come over to Tampa Bay, and I had done a show in the Southeast back then. And I remember talking, and I used to describe him as he's a spaz. He is an absolute spaz. But you know what? He's matured a bit, and he's matured enough he makes more good plays than he does crazy plays. Boy, he gets that ground game going. I think they take care of business. Next up, the Packers in Minnesota. This should be fun to watch. Pick 'em, 48.5 is the total. I've been looking forward to this one, a rematch. Minnesota won the earlier match, 31-29. That was back in week 4. And if you recall that one, I see Green Bay was down 28-7 before they could blink an eye. Almost came back all the way to win the game, fell by 2. And I look at this Minnesota team, you got 8 straight wins. But do you think we can dock them at all for beating Chicago twice, the Falcons with Cousins, Tennessee, and the Jaguars for 5 of those wins in that 8-game win streak? Did that enter your handicap in this one? Because I am docking them a little bit. As much as I like the way Darnold's played the Vikings, still been a soft schedule for most of those 8 wins.
Yeah, absolutely. And they played Colts with Richardson, right? And they lost to the Rams by 10. They have a phenomenal coach, and that's what makes them interesting because Seattle has a good coach too. And, I was going to tell you something offline about the Seahawks head coach, and I'll still tell you that offline. Remind me today. Okay. But you have a Minnesota team here that Darnold threw for 3 touchdowns in his last game. And, of course, Geno threw for 2 interceptions, as Geno usually does. Geno's a better version of our crab man over from Cleveland, right? It's the same type, of Winston, except he doesn't throw
Right.
pick sixes, but he'll still throw some picks. I like the Packers here. The Packers know they lost. I hate the fact they come off a 34-0 win in their last contest. I do think that this game goes under this time around, and I think it goes solidly under. Because I think the Packers are not going to get shell-shocked early, like you were saying, like they were before. And also 24 points is still the fourth largest for Seattle. They've given up to Seattle as well. Fourth largest point total over the last 4 weeks. So I actually like Green Bay, and I like the under, but I think I like the under a little bit more.
Yeah, well, Packers are 11-4. 4 losses came by 2 to Minnesota, 5 to the Eagles, 2 losses to Detroit, including the 3-point loss that last time. I do believe that they come through in this game this week in the Dome. Cowboys at Philadelphia. The Eagles laying 7, the total 39. Late breaking news Thursday afternoon. CeeDee Lamb is definitely out for this game. He was downgraded to missing the contest. Eagles had that 10-game winning streak snapped last week. They led Washington 27-14 in the fourth quarter. They lost Jalen Hurts to concussion. He only threw 4 passes in the game. And then we saw 22 points scored in the fourth quarter going the other way. So Hurts, as of Thursday late afternoon, early evening, is still listed as questionable with that concussion. Dallas, they're a bad luck loss against Cincinnati a few weeks ago from a 5-0 run. We've seen them play better for Rush, but he doesn't have Lamb. I just, again, we try to give at least an opinion on every game. I can't do it in this game. I just can't do it.
Yeah, I like the Cowboys here. And I think the Cowboys are probably, leading one of the biggest farces in the country, which is giving their fans hope every week. Every season they give them hope. And then Jerry, of course, does what Jerry does. And then they suck. But he continues to build their hopes up until he gets them crushed again. But they'll have moments where you'll get really excited as a Cowboys fan. And this will be one of those moments where you're not going to the playoffs, you're not going to do anything, but you will beat the Eagles one time this season. And as this team is 7-8 here, and as this team comes off nice wins against Tampa Bay and Carolina, as it's fun to say, did we pay the wrong quarterback? Rush and Dak are the same age, actually. So they're wondering if they paid the wrong quarterback, which is all fun and nice semantics to talk about. This team has won 4 out of their last 5. They beat Washington. They beat the Giants. They should have beaten the Bengals. They should have won 5 in a row. And, so I actually think the vibe is better here. I think Philadelphia honestly doesn't care about this game. They got the Giants next. They're looking to get healthy. And I could easily see Dallas winning this game. And then I could easily see Dallas giving Washington trouble next week, even though they're not going to go anywhere. And that's how Dallas will end the season. So I'm going to lean on Dallas.
Good stuff. Dolphins laying 6.5, the total 40 at Cleveland. I was looking at the weather because it's automatic. You don't play Tua when it's cold, when the weather's bad, all that kind of stuff. He just doesn't win. He doesn't usually perform well. But it's not supposed to be that bad in Cleveland, according to the forecast. And again, this is Thursday, so kind of check things out, folks, for all the games you're involved in as you get closer to kickoff. But it's looking like low 40s and maybe some rain. Tua can probably handle that. At the same time, I don't like him in this contest. I do like the under here. 6 of Miami's last 7 road games have stayed under the total, and the nonstop rains could play into that if there's a little bit of a breeze. And Cleveland's all dink and dunk. I mean, DTR goes 24 for 43 the last 2 weeks I see with 3 picks, no touchdowns. How about 4.1 yards per pass attempt in his 43 passes? My one concern is that he might throw a pick or two. One might go for a pick 6. The other one might set up Miami deep in Cleveland territory. That's the caveat when it comes to betting a low total under when it comes to the Browns. But I think that's the play here.
Yeah, I can see why. I mean, if I had to pick, that's why the total is 39.5. So that's great analysis. I like Miami here. I don't mind laying the points here. They have the Jets after this, and if they beat the Jets, and what they're thinking is they're 7-8, they can try to finish off 9-8. Miami was actually very close. They should have beat Houston, in my opinion. They lost to Buffalo by 3. You had 2 hurt for a bunch of those games. They lost to the Colts in Arizona, all games that they could have won. So I can see Miami busted out here. They lost their last 2 road games, so I think they'll be extra focused here and a great opportunity to destroy a Cleveland team that only scored 13 points in their last 2 games. And so I like the Dolphins.
Good stuff. Let's wrap it up with Monday Night Football. The Lions laying 3.5, total 50.5 at San Francisco. And Dan Campbell came out early in the week and he said, we will not rest our key players, our starters on Monday. And he said they're going to treat this like any other game, even with Minnesota on deck. And I tend to believe Campbell, whether he makes odd coaching decisions or statements before or after games. I'm telling you, when he talks at the mic, I happen to trust the guy when he says, we're going to do this, and they do it. I mean, he's certainly type A plus alpha male on the sideline over there, and he tends to wear his emotions on his sleeve. Now, Detroit's banged up, as we all know, in the defensive front seven, but San Francisco is shutting down players this week, some of them, nothing to play for. They're going to be without potentially 3 offensive linemen, maybe even 4 this week, which should help that banged up Lions defense. And meanwhile, Detroit should be healthier this week on the offensive line. And finally, San Francisco's covered just 1 of 9 against teams with a winning record. They're missing the spread in those games by 9 points per game. Not just losing outright, but missing the spread. I think the under is probably the better way to go here, but I also kind of like Detroit in this one.
Yeah, man. What is it? 80, 82, 85% of the public riding Detroit. I mean, that's just nuts.
Yeah.
After the coach says that, and the line was 4 earlier this week, and it's come back down to 3.5. And that's after the coach says, I'm going to keep my starters, and the line goes in favor of San Francisco. You know what I mean? I'm going to play my starters, and the line goes in favor of San Francisco. I like the over. I can't take Detroit. I can't take, because it's such a favorite. I can't take San Francisco because they're so shaky. I think that San Francisco has nothing to lose, so they're just going to go balls to the walls. And I think they're going to do so many crazy stuff, and they're just going to try everything because there's nothing to lose. And you obviously have Shanahan, who has job security. He's led them to the Super Bowl a bunch of times. So it is what it is there. And I think Detroit's going to have to play catch-up at times. And I like the over. I just think it gets out of hand, and it's one of those 36-30 type of games or 33-30 or something, and they sneak inside the number. And a bunch of San Fran guys that don't get a chance to play are going to play, so they're going to play hard. So I like the over in this game.
Oh, I'll be on opposite totals then. I'll like under 50.5. You got good reasons for taking over 50.5. Listen, I wanted to tell everybody that when we come back next week, our next show, we should have 2 of the playoff games in college football in the books. Of course, the Tuesday night game and the early Wednesday game should both be final by the times we talk. So we'll dig into those a little bit more. And we've got week 18 of the NFL before we head to the NFL postseason. So that'll always be interesting. It's always an interesting handicap in that final week of the season. You got to kind of wait around for lines when the books normally have them set and ready to go by Sunday evenings. Not always the case in week 18. But listen, good stuff. Check out Arun. I see Indian Cowboys plays all week long, and his daily plays also in all sports over on his homepage at DocSports.com. Same for me. And don't forget about that $60 free account. If you're not yet a member at DocSports.com, you click on the link below the video and get yourself set up for that. Any closing thoughts before we wrap it up here, Indian Cowboy?
No, man, just I've been really enjoying a lot of soup lately, and
you sound like you're fighting it, man. Like you're fighting a little head cold.
Yeah, I am. My favorite food is gumbo and jambalaya. So just eating a bunch of gumbo and enjoying that. But yeah, I think we'll come up with a show, and we'll title the show. We could just keep it Scott and Arun.
I like Icy Scott, but
Icy Scott. Yeah, I mean we could definitely do because when we tag the show, people are going to search it based on that. Because they want to find the show. And what do you think? You like IC Scott?
We'll figure it out over the weekend. Yeah, I think we need to have one, though, for next week, but we'll figure it out over the weekend.
How about this? For any more comments, you guys give us – I mean, we have till the end of the year, obviously. We have the whole We'll start the next year with the show name. But continue to post comments for us. We do read them, and let us know what you like for the name of our show.
Absolutely. Listen, I hope you get over that cold. It's been crazy, I see, and I'm not trying to jinx myself here, but in 2020, in November of 2020, I actually got COVID. I had it bad, and it lasted for a little while. And I remember I was thinking I was headed for the hospital at about 2:00 in the morning on a Thursday. It was Thanksgiving week. And I woke up about 10 hours later, and I felt like I was 50% better after fighting COVID for 2 weeks back then. And that was back when everybody's scared because nobody's, we had nothing going on back then. We had no vaccines. But here's the thing. You're a doctor. I've not had a cold since. It's like that changed my immune system forever. I've not been sick. I think the most I've had is a sneeze or two. It's been crazy ever since I had COVID. And again, I'm knocking on wood here because I'm hoping that I don't wake up tomorrow with something, it's going around Vegas.
Did you get vaccinated?
I did after when that became available, like 6 months later or whatever it was. I did.
Yeah.
I did twice, actually.
Well, I mean, it's funny, man, because we got little kids and they go to daycare and they bring home everything,
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I feel like it just depends. Do you exercise?
I do, not as much as I used to, but I hit the treadmill about 3 times a week.
But don't you eat healthy and stuff too?
Pretty healthy. I'm East Asian.
Because your wife's Asian and stuff. Yeah, because Asian people have a great diet of great gut health, bacteria,
Sure.
with antioxidants. They just don't get sick as often. So I think part of it is it's some of it's genetics, but some of it's just what you eat.
Yeah.
And like I drink a lot of coffee, and I don't get sick often because coffee has so much antioxidants. A cup of black coffee is like fantastic. You hear all
Yeah.
these like ginger tea and this and that, dude. Just drink coffee. Just drink black coffee, and you'll be super healthy.
Every morning, 2 cups of black coffee every single morning. Sometimes at night when I'm working those late night up until 2 a.m. type of hours, just to get me a little bit of caffeine as I'm looking at the games. But there you go, man. You got 2 for 1. You got football games from us. You got the medical version of what's going on from IC. We wish you the best. We wish you to be healthy real soon. Everybody, listen, man. Hope you had a great Christmas. Hope you have a great Hanukkah. And I hope you have a great holiday season. And of course, next week when we hit the show, it'll be 2025 already. For Arun, I'm Scott. You know what to do, everybody. Let's put them in the win column. We'll talk to you next week.